I'm Austin Luca.
I'm Andrew Harp.
This is With Nothing to Say.
Let's talk about seeds.
Before we get into this week's film, next week we are going to be watching William Friedkin's Sorcerer. This is a film, Andrew, you have seen once before. I've never seen it. I've seen Wages of Fear, which is similar. Apparently, it comes from the same book. Is it come from a
I,
book?
I
Is that
guess like same story, same book. I'm sure it's a
the
book.
story? Who knows? Maybe we'll find it, try to
I
read
think
it.
the book. I think the book is called Wages of Fear.
Okay. Maybe I'll
Um,
rewatch Wages of Fear. God, I love that movie.
I saw that
I'm
movie, and
excited
then
for
I
this.
when I first saw Sorcerer, I saw Wages of Fear, and then I watched Sorcerer. But again, like both of them are like not connected. Like there's no. They come from the same source material, but
Right.
Friedkin, I think, I said that like he had Wages of Fear had no influence on him, but Wages of Fear is an amazing movie. I love that movie. Um, they're both very different, even though they come from the
Yeah.
same source material.
That would be a great double feature.
No,
I
yeah,
bet.
I would say it is. They're both very different, so I guess that would make them a
Yeah.
very good double feature. Sorcerer is like
Okay.
2 hours, and like what? Like Wages of Fear is like 2.5 hours.
Yeah, Wages of Fear is pretty long.
Yeah, it's a
It's
long
really
movie.
it really pushing it. I'm excited for this. I love some William Friedkin. I think the only thing, I mean, I obviously I've seen Exorcist. I've
We
seen The
we covered
French
him before.
Connection.
Yeah, we covered him before on French Connection. I love French Connection. I love
French
Exorcist.
Connection's great. I don't know if there's anything
Um, I've seen
else
a
of
lot of
his
his
I've seen.
movies. I like a
I'm
sports
down.
movie, Blue
Yeah.
Chips. That movie's rocks.
What's Blue Chips
Yeah, rest in
about?
peace. It's a basketball movie.
R.I.P. Ooh, I love a basketball movie. I mean, not as
It's
much as
it's
I
a
love a
it's
baseball movie, but I still love a
it's a really
basketball
good
movie too.
it's a really good sports movie. It has Nick Nolte in it. He's really good.
All right. Well, I'm down.
Cool.
All right, but this week we watched a film I probably never would have found or watched if Andrew, you hadn't suggested it.
Yeah, this is some real
Weeds.
this is some real trash. Um, this is a movie that they watch in Taxi Driver, like in the scene when Robert De Niro is on the date with the girl, and they're like, "Oh, we got to go see this movie," and she's like, "Okay," and they go in, and it's a dirty theater, it's a porno theater, and she's like, "This is the movie that they're watching." I'm
Is it
kidding. That's
really?
a joke. No, it's a joke.
Okay.
But I'm just saying, like, this is
This
like
movie's pretty intense.
this is one of those movies that would play in one of those theaters. Is what I'm saying.
Yes, absolutely. It's definitely a there. How did you find out about this movie, Andrew?
Well, I read the book. I read a book
Uh-huh.
about Andy Milligan because I was getting into John Waters, and I like John Waters a lot. I don't know if you watched a John Waters movie before.
Uh, I don't think so.
I love John Waters. He's a big he's written a lot of books as well, and he loves books. And so I was like looking at like a list or something of like books that he books that he really loved, and one of the books that um was on the list was a book about Andy Milligan called trying to see what the name of the book was called. I'm trying to think what it was. I think it was called um why can't I find the name of the book? Um no, it's fine. I got it. I got it.
What is it?
It's called The Ghastly One. The 42nd Street Netherworld of director Andy Milligan. Yeah, this book is it's written by Jimmy McDonig, and
Okay.
he's written a lot of books. Anyway, John Waters said this book was really good. I got the library because it's very out of print, and I read it just out on a whim. And crazy book, crazy dude, one of the most craziest dudes you'll ever learn about. Um, had a crazy his life. I think if you learn more about his life, his movies probably become more rich. Um, his mother, of course, was an alcoholic and abusive, which
That
obviously
tracks.
plays into this movie very much.
Yep.
And I guess he would. I guess he was very. He would. I think. Uh, talk about her all the time to people about how awful she was.
Hmm.
Um, and the book too. And I will say, like with John Waters and Andy Milligan, they have very similar. I can kind of see why he likes Andy Milligan or finds him interesting because they have very similar styles. They're both from the East Coast.
Sure.
I believe Andy Milligan's from New York. Andy Milligan also he always had like small businesses. I think like he always had like dress shops and stuff like that. And so I think he would always like do the clothing for his movies.
Very
And
cool.
he worked a lot in the 50s with like experimental theater in
Okay.
New York City, like experimental theater, as in like kind of like a lot of the things that you see in Seeds, I think, where it's like people going nuts, like hitting each other, flailing around and stuff like that, like really kind of like pushing themselves physically. And you know, like John Waters, he's a gay man.
Sure is.
And he died of AIDS. And he died I think in like he died in the early 90s of AIDS. And he was broke and he was buried in an unmarked grave. So yeah,
Jeez.
yeah. And he made a lot of movies, I think similar to this one. He also made a lot of like gory movies too later in his life. And I believe a lot of movies that he made in the early 60s are lost as well. Like you can't, there are no prints existing.
Right.
But yeah, really interesting guy. But even after I read the book, I didn't watch any of his movies for some reason, just because they're not like super accessible.
No,
But
they're
I don't know
not.
why. I just thought it was a good time to watch it, and I think I was correct in picking it because I think it's really interesting.
I think it's the perfect film for the perfect time, but this movie, wildly enough, TCM owns the distribution rights to this film.
Yeah, it's classic.
How or why they bought the rights to this? Because this is definitely not up TCM's alley. Because they're a very classic. They love their
Casablanca.
Casablancas,
Yeah,
and
we both said
right.
it was.
This is what everyone
Yeah,
thinks of when
yeah,
they think of TCM.
yeah. Exactly. Citizen
You
Kane.
would, yeah, you would not think this would be on their list. And even though they own the distribution rights, it's not on HBO Max because HBO Max owns TCM. I was kind of hoping that maybe they might put it on there just because they own the rights, but they just buried it. So the version that I found was on YouTube because it took me a while to find a version of this. I know there's versions all over the place, but like there's not like any easy way to find it.
How long is that version?
This version is an hour and 21 minutes. Yeah, an hour and 21 minutes.
Does the version on YouTube have nudity?
Yeah,
Wow.
yep.
Okay. There's a version of it on Internet Archive as well. That's the one I
Okay,
watched. I'm assuming it's the exact same one.
probably.
That's weird. Yeah, that's weird that it's just like on YouTube like that. I'm assuming it's not going to be like that forever because I mean it is nudity.
Yeah, I think let me see. I think it's only been on here for 2 months. So I'm guessing what
Okay,
happens
yeah,
is like every
they
couple
just
of
they
months they take it
someone just
down.
uploads it. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But I mean
Somebody
this
like probably uploaded it and now it's going to get taken down whenever it finds out. It's not exactly a famous movie, so I mean, no one's really like looking after it. I'm assuming, but still, it's like it would probably be against like the
yeah, I don't
rules on YouTube for nudity. So I don't
I
know.
mean
It's
YouTube
weird.
seems pretty strict on us. We seem to get strikes all the time, which are
You and
eventually
Dot
revoked. Yeah, our
really? Oh,
podcast
interesting.
all the time.
But not Andy Milligan's seeds, I
But not
guess.
any so this has over 375,000 views. So
Wow, that's
it's
cool.
not unpopular. Like people are watching it, which is great. And I
Yeah,
love
it's
it.
great. Yeah, it should be free on YouTube. I don't know who would benefit it, who benefit from. I don't know who would lose the benefits out of out of it being for free, for free on streaming.
Yeah.
But
It's what
you
Andy
know,
Milligan would have wanted.
he would have wanted that. Yeah, he would have. Well, I don't want to imagine what Andy Milligan would have wanted. Uh,
Probably not.
he very very disturbed person, but I think like with Seeds it's like once again he made a lot of movies so I can't really speak for him too much on this, but like Seeds I think is just kind of like it's one of those movies where um I'm able to sort of for a moment for like less than 90 minutes be able to kind of like enter into the Andy Milligan mindset, I guess, and to see like kind of what he is kind of see what like is going on, and To me, that's the appeal of the movie and why it's so good, in my opinion.
Yeah, if there's anything heartbreaking about this is the restoration, if you can even call it that, isn't spectacular. I mean, it's in like
No,
a
it's like these movies are meant to be like thrown in the garbage, right? Like they're meant to be like made, put
yeah.
together, and then they play it like maybe like a couple times in a disgusting theater in New York City on 42nd Street, and then they're like thrown away into the trash can. Like they're not meant to be preserved.
Yeah.
So yeah, but I think a while ago, a boutique Blu-ray, I forget which one, like a boutique Blu-ray company, like put together a really cool box set of his movies, but I don't remember who. It might have been like Vinegar Syndrome or something like that,
Okay.
or Arrow or something like that. I don't know. They should do a Criterion box set though too. They should
I'd
every
love to see that.
yeah. Well, the original box set did look really good though. I would love
Yeah.
to have that one. That would be so good. Um, but yeah, it's rough. Like it sounds rough, it looks rough just from like a technical point of view. So you really kind of have to like squint and like really kind of like focus in on it because it's
Yeah.
not exactly expensive production wise.
No, not at all. And it doesn't help either that this movie is just absolutely insane.
Mhm.
Like it's very clearly coming from an insane human being, which is amazing. And I think what makes this film so spectacular is for 90 minutes you are sort of inside the psyche of Andy Milligan. Like it is raw, just wildness.
Yeah, I love it. I think it's great.
And that's the podcast.
Yeah, that's the podcast. Yep. Thanks for listening. No, no, it's like, it's like I like it because it deals with a lot of like, it's just crazy, like kind of like some of the issues that it deals with. And, I like the movie because it introduces you right away to the mother of Seeds, um, who's the best character
Incredible
in the movie.
performance. Honestly, all around incredible performances. Like these actors,
Yeah, I would say
there's
more or
something
less
about like
everyone's, they're
there's
like
something about
theater
like B-rate.
actors.
Yeah, they're like theater
Yeah.
like B movie actors. There's something
So good.
spectacular about them. Like I think if you ever watch a B movie, like the actors put in so much more for some reason. I think it's because like they have everything on the line. You know what I mean? Like this is like all they have. So they
It
just
kind of
put
remind me of
so
like
much into
Stuart
it.
Gordon movies a little bit. Kind of reminds me of Stuart
Okay.
Gordon's the way that people act in that movie.
Yeah.
Um, and once again, these Annie Milligan movies, this at least like watching this one, of course, I've seen like they do remind me of John Waters movies as well. But John Waters was making movies around the same time Milligan was.
Right.
But like John Waters' movies are more Siege is like unintentionally funny, but I think John Waters movies have like an intention of comedy. So they're more silly and lighthearted and stuff like that, even when they are being like really disgusting. Um but yeah, he's another guy that came to mind when I was watching Seeds.
Yeah, there's definitely something humorous about this film, but in an extremely twisted
Yeah.
and just bonkers way. I mean, you can't help laughing just at like how absurd everything is, and everything is so serious. You know what I mean? Like everything is like the biggest deal in the
Yeah.
world, which is great, and I love it. Like no one's ever just like chill. Everyone's like super angry or like upset 100% of the time. There's like not
They're
one moment. I mean, it's only 90
flailing and
minutes.
screaming. Yeah.
It just
There's
doesn't
so much like
stop. I mean,
it's
just right from
yeah.
the beginning.
I like just to speak real quick too before we get into like the performances or whatever, which is really like kind of hard of the movie. But like I love the location too, the house location. It's like an
Great set.
ugly, cramped house. I was reading, I was just kind of like updating myself like on the Wikipedia page on Andy Milligan, and
Yeah.
I guess like he was briefly married to a woman, and he got married to that woman in that house. So it's a real
In this
house.
house.
I believe so, yeah.
Real house, real place.
Yeah, but I did read that like no one took the no one took the marriage seriously when he got married because they were like, yeah, Andy's gay, like he's a gay man, like
Yeah. It's so claustrophobic. I mean, every single
yeah, it's
shot, every time we're in this house, like you just feel constantly cramped. I mean, there's so many people in this space. And just like also too, I mean, my God, the amount of handhelds and just shaking camera. I mean, it's all fucking over the
Yeah.
place.
Yeah. Like when someone gets killed, he does like the shaky kind of like camera thing where like he's kind of like going in a circle or something like that. Like he always does that. And yeah, everybody is like flailing around and stuff like that. Like there's just a lot of like flailing and screaming and stuff. And like we discussed, like the set just kind of has like every like room just feels like way too small. It feels like everyone is
Yeah.
like bigger than the room can contain them in. And so it just feels like everything is like really like cramped and stuff. um like two people in a room, it feels like that's too many people. Like that's how small the
Yeah.
rooms kind of feel sometimes. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think that's partly some camera trickery, but he also
Right.
utilizes a lot of theater style lighting. So there's a lot of things that are just like
Yeah.
super overexposed or underexposed, which makes
Yeah.
everything just feel off, because the weird thing about lighting for a camera versus lighting for a theater is when you light for a camera, you have to create a sense of depth, which you don't have to do in theater. But in this piece, he basically lights it how he would light a theater piece. So there's no sense of depth. I think that's part of the reason why everything feels so cramped. Like there's no sense of like uh foreground or background. Like everything just feels right there, right in front of you all of the time. And
Yeah,
it works
I think
perfectly.
yeah, I think also too that because I think there's not like a lot going on production wise, they have to do a lot of like close-ups too,
Close
right? Like
ups.
they can't like really do a lot of like wide shots to expose like the fact that it's not a movie, you know what I mean? Well, you know what I mean? Like it's not like a set, or it's not like it's like
Yeah.
a person's house, you know what I mean? Like I think too, like they have to do like a lot of like crazy like close-ups of people's faces, or people talking to each other really close, or having, intercourse or whatever. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean that camera just gets right up in their fucking faces. It is just like, I mean, I can only imagine
Yeah,
being the actor.
and Andy Milligan, yeah, I believe was known to be quite abusive to his actors. I
Oh.
don't think he was a nice. I don't think he was a very nice person to his actors at all, in every kind of way. So,
I could see
yeah,
that.
yeah, I don't think he was
I'm
a
not
very nice guy.
surprised.
I don't think he was like a Robert Altman, where it's like, oh, like
Everyone loves him.
everyone loves him and he's so nice and gentle, and he's so cool and he does all this stuff. And then Andy Milligan is just probably just like beating on his actors and stuff like that horribly. Not a good guy. And it's like the movies too are just like, yeah, I don't know, but it makes sense, right, when you watch it.
Yes. I think if there's one thing you can say about this movie, even if you hate this movie, even if you hate everything about this movie, it is very much a fingerprint of Andy Milligan. I mean, I don't think anyone else on earth could honestly make this movie. I think Andy Milligan's the only person that could really make this movie. So, like, you could hate everything about this movie. You can hate the way it looks, you can hate the way it sounds, you can hate the set design, you can hate the costumes, you can hate whatever you want. But I mean, this is the core of Andy Milligan. Like, if you don't watch any of his other work, you know who he is, and this is very much him.
I think I've heard a few of his other movies are better than this, but I haven't gone around to them just yet. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you. Like this one's pretty yeah, I like everything that you mentioned. I like all of it. I mean, yeah, like I said, you kind of really have to like focus in so you don't miss any like with dialogue, because it sounds so garbled and messed and like, terrible.
Yeah.
But it's a relatively simple movie for the most part. Part of me is just kind of like, okay, what's going on? Oh my God, there's going to be multiple. Part of me at the beginning is like, oh my God, there's going to be multiple characters. Like, oh no, how am I going to tell people apart? But honestly, it's simple and straightforward enough. And I really think like the writing in the movie is really good. Like, I think like Andy's like dialogue in it, and honestly, like the way that he kind of even structures the story, like I think it's pretty good. Like I like it a lot. You know what I mean? Like I think it's surprisingly really really good. Um, I'm sure it just accumulated experience, and obviously the movie's very amateur and cheap, but like there's clearly like, and yeah, like there is like a craziness to it too. There is like this volatile nature
Yeah.
to it, but it's not. It's still coming from a guy that's very talented.
Yeah, I was. very skeptical of what the story and sort of writing would be more than anything else, just because these tend to be the things with these types of filmmakers often. And when I say these types of filmmakers, I mean sort of your more experimental underground, even you could call them B-movie directors, although I don't think that's really the right term because they're not making big budget films, but I just mean you're kind of independent filmmakers of the 60s, which is just a very different era than what an independent filmmaker looks like now, because it was just really fucking hard to be an independent filmmaker like 60 years ago. So it's just an entirely different game. But typically the writing and story is kind of at the bottom of the list of things. Like typically what you look for is sort of the more
And sometimes sometimes with this movie too, you kind of feel like there are plenty of scenes where you're just like, okay, pretty much anytime you see like nudity in the movie for the most part, you can pretty much discount that. You know what I mean?
yeah.
Like that can kind of be, that can kind of be erased from your brain. Um, there are plenty of scenes like that, right? Like because it is made for that
A
in
specific
mind,
audience.
right? A
Yeah.
specific audience, yeah, but uh, it's not too hard to look past that, I think, and then look at the rest of it.
Yeah, the story here is feels convoluted, and yet when you kind of sit down with it, it's incredibly complicated and detailed, and just the ability to sort of juggle all these different characters and all their different
Yeah.
motivations is really impressive. And like you've been saying, you really do have to pay attention, not only because the dialogue can be garbled sometimes and the camera's all over the place, but just because there's a lot of shit going on in a very short amount of time. It's super volatile, it's moving at a just rapid pace, and really the only time you ever have a break, like really the only time you can kind of pause is, as you're kind of saying, is when there's nudity, which don't really add anything to the movie. Like
It,
there's nothing
it's just softcore
there.
pornography.
It's
Yeah. It's
just
just,
like, especially
yeah.
like that opening scene where, or one of the early on scenes where the woman takes a bath, like that adds nothing to the movie at all.
Oh yeah, I
There's no
think
reason for
Cindy,
it.
Cindy, right, is the sister. I
Cindy,
think that's her
yeah,
name.
the
Yeah.
sister that she lives there,
That
right?
scene goes on forever. It feels
Way
so
too
long.
long.
You can pretty much completely discount that scene. You just can
Yes.
kind of, like you said, you can just maybe like look at your phone for a minute or,
Yep.
just kind of. But other than that scene, there's like a couple other like flashes here and there of like that stuff, but it goes by much quicker than the bath
Yeah.
scene, I think. And but that's like it's not even like a
It's fine.
criticism. It's just like, yeah, like it's a 42nd Street, New York City, like softcore porn. Like I don't know what to tell you, but everything else in terms of like the story and everything going on is fantastic. Like
Yeah, it truly is on point. And honestly, even though there is quite a bit of nudity in this, and of course I am a bit of a prude, I enjoy a film that can
are you really?
withstand when it comes to
You really don't like
movies.
nudity? You really don't care about like nudity, or like I'm not saying care, but like you would rather there not be.
I mean, in a movie like this, I don't, it couldn't exist, right? And I accept that. Like this movie just
Okay,
couldn't
yeah, yeah,
exist without nudity,
yeah,
just
yeah, yeah.
because of the the story it's trying to tell and the people it's trying to please and all those things. But I'm always impressed when a movie can do something without not only nudity, but even without cursing. It's why I love the movies of like the 30s and 40s, because we talk about, go back to that Alfred Hitchcock movie we watched, Strangers on a Train. I think that's the one we watched.
Yep,
And that whole idea that he's able to sort of bypass, and the creativity involved in bypassing the sort of Catholic Church who basically ran the MPAA of the time. And there's still some pretty like intense innuendos in there, but it's
of course.
very sly and sort of, you had to be very creative, right, to make those kind of jokes where in the world of today, and
Yeah, like
that's not
what
to say
about
all
like
directors say that, right?
yeah, like well, what about like movies like Asteroid City and Beau is Afraid? There's a lot of nudity in those movies.
Is there a lot of nudity in Asteroid City? I remember in Beau is Afraid, which is fine. I just, to me, it feels, a lot of the time, it feels lazy. Like it doesn't
Mhm.
really add anything to the story for me personally. That's not to say like there isn't something there. It's just, I mean, in this, it's a very different scenario, right? Like
Yeah.
he's making it, right?
It's
Like
also
I'm
done so
not,
half it's also done so half-assedly, right? Like it's done like halfway where there's no sex. It's just
no.
like there's just kind of like they just kind of like if there's a guy and a girl, they just kind of like go against each other, right? Like
It seems to be
they
made by
make
someone who
out.
does not understand how sex works.
Well, at least heterosexual sex, right? Like,
Heterosexual
yeah,
sex,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, yeah. But yeah, and then the bath
Which
scene
makes
where
it
she's taking a
hilarious.
bath is like,
Like it's not
okay,
sexy, you know what I mean?
no,
Which is
it's
weird.
not, No, it's like because like the actors are just like normal actors. Like they're not
They're
like
just
models or
people.
anything. They're just regular
Yeah.
people like that also have to like get naked because the guy producing the movie or whatever who ordered the movie is probably just like, all right, there have to be like 5 minutes of nudity in the movie,
Right.
like for the audience, so yeah. But once again, for in this case, it's pretty much completely discounted, kind of just whatever. It doesn't really matter. um but everything else in it is fucking awesome, is
It
great. I
really
just
is.
like another thing to point out too of the crampedness, when they're all at the table together, they all look so
Oh
cramped
my
together at the
God.
table. They're
That
not
tiny
all
little
meant to be.
table.
It's so
There's
funny.
like
Like
10 people at this
they're gonna
table.
have like Thanksgiving dinner. Yeah, I just wanted to point that out. I just thought that looked really funny, and them all crammed together.
The way
Anyway,
they shoot that scene is
yeah,
wild, or really
yeah,
any of scenes with a lot of people in it, because there are like no wides. I don't think he really almost ever has like a
no,
wide
not really.
ever, which means you're just kind of thrown into these scenes and like we just jump from moment to moment. So there's no like
Like room to
establishing
room.
we're here or we're here. Like he doesn't give a shit. He has no interest in trying to explain to you how this house works or where the fuck any of these rooms are compared to other rooms. Like it doesn't matter. He doesn't care. And with that table scene, which you would think like if you're ever gonna have a wide shot, here's the time, right? Here's the moment where you want to be able
It's
to
a
see everyone.
there's maybe a little bit of wideness there, where you maybe kind of like you can only see like the table and just everybody sitting there. But
A
it's like
little
that's
bit, but
about
it's like from a low angle. So like you're kind of like looking up at everyone.
yeah,
You know what I
I would
mean?
say like that's about it's wide, but it's not like that wide. Like it's not the
It's-
whole room. But yeah, it's that's about as wide as it'll get with the shots, I feel. Um but anyway, to kind of talk about like the story of the movie, you
yeah,
get the mother. This she's like an
terrible human being,
alcoholic, disabled mother. Um,
abusive.
she has like caretakers at her home, and her daughter lives there. Her older daughter lives there. Sydney, I think her name is. And
Hmm.
Sydney surprises her with the fact that like all of her brothers and sisters and their partners are going to be there for the holidays for a couple days. I love her reaction, the mom's reaction when she finds out and she starts like breaking things and the
It is wonderful. By the way, this is
so
technically a
good.
Christmas movie. If you wanted to watch this around
It's
Christmas
true. Yep, this is a great movie to put on with the family, with your brothers and your sisters and
and
your
your
mom
little
and your dad.
siblings, yeah.
Yeah, they'll just love it. Like they'll love. Like, yeah, not a yeah. Yeah, definitely a Christmas movie. Um, yeah, and she freaks out because she doesn't want to see them because she feels like she calls them bad seeds. Um,
Great line.
she hates them. There's a lot of good lines in the movie. There's so many good lines in the movie. Um, and with Sydney, at the beginning of the movie and through the middle, I thought she kind of sucked at first as an actor. I thought she was kind of poor at it.
Mm,
But by the time the movie ends, I realized that her performance was kind of genius because she's kind of doing this infantilizing kind of thing. You know what I mean?
mm,
She's a little bit like infantilized a little bit. And I realized by the time the movie ended, like how genius it was. But we'll get to that.
yeah. Yeah. I turned on the movie again this morning. It's only been a couple of days since I watched it, but this movie is just so chaotic. Like
It's crazy.
the the feelings from the film stay with you forever, but most of the plot immediately went out of my head for this movie.
That's fine. It's just a movie about like a fucked up family. That's pretty much like the
incest,
core
and
idea. Yeah, like yeah, just a kind
whole lot of
of
incest.
incest, abuse, alcoholism, drug abuse. Well, maybe drugs are, yeah, drugs are, just kind of like, you, you know, siblings hating each other, mothers hating their kids. It's just like there's Michael, who I think is like kind of it's established early on that he had sex with his sister Sydney when they were teenagers. And then
Gross.
you have Matthew, who's the priest. And it's established that
Yeah.
he apparently sexually abused their youngest brother, who's like 17.
Yeah.
And there's like the older sister, who's the blonde one. And they all have like their like wives and husbands. Um, and and then and as they're all like just yelling at each other and stuff, everybody's slowly getting killed. So I think the two wives are the first that get killed, right?
Yeah. The way the way they kill him with the cane.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. There is something like really funny about that, like
Something Looney Tunes-esque about it.
yeah. When they push like the radio into the tub,
Yes.
like she also use the cane to like move the chair that he's standing
Yep.
on, that he's kind of like yoink, like yeah, or like she's like standing behind the door like with the knife. Some stuff doesn't make any sense. Like she has to
No.
stand in this exact spot for like the door to like stab her, right? Like I guess obviously she must have been behind that door ready to like, with all their
Yeah.
might, make her stab herself. But yeah, I like how everybody is killed too. Not all of them, but some of them are like going to kill themselves, and then they decide, and they're like they can't do it, and then but then like
It's so strange.
they're killed anyway through that. Yeah,
The
it's
amount
like
of
the
people
guys
who
are.
like attempt suicide in this house and then are forced into it somehow.
Yeah.
It's a lot. It's really fucked up family. I think the most intense murder, my number one murder or murder slash suicide of this piece,
Oh
it's
yeah, I know what you're gonna mention.
probably the boy when he runs out into the forest and he
Oh
cuts his own
yeah,
wrists.
it's bad.
That seems fucking intense. It
The
is
one where she gets
fucking
like
gross.
acid thrown on her face,
Oh
I
my
think.
god.
That one's
That one's
pretty. That
yeah.
one's that one was unexpected. It's
That
like, where'd
one's
you get the
ghastly.
acid? The hell did you
Who
get
knows?
that?
I don't
Yeah.
know.
I like that couple, like the blonde sister and her
Mhm.
husband or boyfriend or whatever. That guy is like so funny to me for some reason. Like he's like, what does he say? Like, I love you so much I could kill you. That's like kind of sums up the movie well, just because like, yeah, it's like this sort of crazy, like kind of unhealthy juxtaposition between love and hate, right? Like that the movie kind of does. It's
Yeah,
like
it's
unhealthy kind of love of like, I don't know.
yeah, I think it's very much sort of a lens into the abusive relationship and the way we sort of love others in this abusive way, not only physically, which of course there's a whole lot of that, but sexually and psychologically, and this
Yeah.
sort of deep inner cruelty that's within us that's we're somehow attracted to it, as if the very act of being hurt like brings us in closer. It's really fucked up to say the least.
Right, yeah. And I love to like I couldn't help but laugh even though it's kind of fucked up like when Cindy is like planning on where everybody will be in their rooms, right? And she's talking to her mother and she's like, "Oh, well, where's Mike? Michael's wife is going to go." And she's like she kind of like does like this look of like, "Oh yeah, Michael's wife," because she wants to have
Fuck
sex
her.
with him.
So gross.
Yeah. Yeah, and she's like, ugh, yeah, it's gross. But yeah, it just yeah, it just like escalates more and more. And spoiler alert, it turns out Sydney is the one that's basically killing everybody.
She sure
Um,
is.
which isn't really like that surprising. It's not really like a big twist or anything like that. I guess like it's either going to be her or the mom, right?
I thought it was gonna be the mom because they have that the maid and the butler or
Oh,
whoever have
right.
that conversation at the beginning, and they're like, I think like the mom's going around and like doing shit. So I thought it was gonna be the mom plus the cane,
Yeah, yeah, that too, like the cane or whatever. Yeah, I figured that would be maybe the, like a
a red herring.
red herring. Yeah, like to kind of like I don't know, but yeah, I see what you mean. It could have been her. Um, they established too, like the mom was like pushed down the stairs, right? Like somebody pushed her. They say this later on in the movie, but like they talk about how like
Yeah.
she was pushed down the stairs by someone, and it's like, oh, it was Sydney. And yeah, she like throws her down the stairs violently, like in the most violent way possible.
That scene, I mean, it's awful, but I couldn't help but laugh. Just
Yeah, I can't. We can't like. Yeah, I don't think we can stress how like the fights in the movie, how they transpire, like when couples are arguing and stuff like that.
yeah,
About like there's there's arguments early on in the movie where the wife of like Matthew wants to have sex with Michael, and so they have like a moment, and then Michael's wife comes back, and then they have an argument, and then Matthew and his wife they have an argument. It's just like kind of like these like arguments that like keep mounting onto each other, and so they get like really loud, and they're like everybody's like hitting each other, and they're all like flailing around a little bit. Like sometimes people get like thrown onto like a bed or something like that, and there's a lot of stuff like that that happens. And I like when the kid like breaks and he freaks out, like the teenage son.
yeah.
He goes nuts. His performance is crazy. It's so quick too.
It is. And he runs out and he cuts his wrist, but I think that's the only time we ever leave the house, isn't it? Do we ever leave the
No, I mean
house?
like we get the we he's at the church, right? The scene at the
Oh,
church. Like the
yeah.
like yeah, that's pretty much it.
That's the one scene outside of
That looks like
that's
a
right,
scene
he's
that
at
they
goes to
just
the
like went
church.
into like an empty church and just like filmed something really quick.
Oh yeah, just like Gorilla style. Just like go, go, go.
They're just like in there and they just like yeah, they get a couple people and they film a thing and then they leave. It's clearly
You
like a
gotta do what you
huge
gotta
like
do.
it's definitely like a huge church that you would see like in New York City or something like that, right? Like a huge
Yeah.
Catholic church.
And it's a cool location, but it is very obvious that they just like snuck into this church when no one's in there. Which, if you've ever been in New York City, what's fascinating is if you ever go to any of these churches when they don't have mass or service, they're almost always empty, which is like the wildest
Yeah.
thing because this city is ginormous and there are so many people here. And yet, even if you go to ones like whether in your midtown or downtown or wherever, you go into these churches and they're just like these quiet, empty spaces almost always. It's the weirdest and most surreal thing, and one of the most amazing juxtapositions for any city. And I don't know why that is. There's just something about it that people just don't go in there. I guess it's like a sign of respect or what have you, but it's very strange.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they're able to grab that scene because they
For the
definitely
movie
stole it.
for the movie Seeds. Yeah. The movie very
Thank you to the
Catholic Christian
Catholic
movie.
Church.
Yeah, the very Catholic Christian movie Seeds. Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, and then yeah, he freaks out on his mom, which is a great scene.
Mhm.
He throws like the mattress or something like that, and he reveals that like Matthew assaulted him, and oh, and like yeah, she's like reading all those like letters of him getting kicked out of the school. That's like funny. Like that's like a funny
It is.
scene of him. Like, look at all these letters. Like she throws them everywhere. And he like yells and screams and flails.
These poor people. Is there a single redeemable character in this movie? Like, is there a single person that can be liked?
I didn't hate the blonde sister.
The one that got acid thrown in her face?
Yeah,
She didn't do very much, though. You don't see her very long. You don't
that's
see
what I'm
very
saying.
much of
Like
her.
I don't think she
You
was
just
like a
don't see enough of
bad.
her to dislike her.
Well, I can't think of like a terrible thing that she did or like a something that would be considered I don't know taboo,
Evil.
evil.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess she's in kind of like she's in like that sadistic relationship with that guy, which you kind of get into.
That's a good point.
Um, yeah, like everybody's just kind of all the characters are kind of like in situations that are just kind of fucked up, just I mean, I'm not going to necessarily say anyone's like evil or whatever. Well, some of them maybe
Sure.
are, but
Mm.
but I'm just saying like, it's like they're all kind of like in these, you know, uh just, gross situations.
They're in a series of situations that makes them evil, which makes you wonder sort of the idea
So-
of evil, or at least Andy Milligan's idea of evil. Of course, my favorite interpretation of evil is the David Lynch idea of evil, which is not so much that any single person is evil, but rather evil is like this thing, almost like the spirit that can inhabit people. Like I always thought that's a really cool way. But in this, evilness seems to be more mm, uh, I would say more nurture than nature. Although that's kind of one of the big things here is like the idea: are they all like bad seeds, right? Are they all just born to be evil, or are they just put in a bunch of shitty situations? And it seems in this case that maybe they're not so much evil; they've just been put in a bunch of awful situations that have
Yeah,
made
the
them
family
terrible people.
collectively is evil. The family collectively is like completely corrupted.
Yeah,
And yeah, putting them all in the same house was not a good idea, probably.
unless you want to kill them all,
Um,
then it's perfect.
right, exactly. Right. Yeah, that is revealed. Um yeah, and I just uh I was thinking about the one line the mom does where it's like I forget who she's talking to. She's talking to like I think one of the wives I don't remember. It's like, why do you dislike I think it was either Matthew or Michael. Like, why do you dislike him? Or why do you hate him? And
Yeah,
she's like, oh, hate's too strong a
too
word. I
strong a
dislike
word.
him. Yeah, I dislike him, which I love. Like,
I love I love how like that's where they draw the line. Like we're okay with
I don't
raping
hate.
and murder, but they don't hate. Not in this family.
Yeah, I don't hate. Yeah. But I really can't. We can't. Once again, we can't really. We got to say, that performance from the mom is just ties the movie together really
It's
well.
top tier. I mean, she really does. Arguably the best performance in the film. I mean, my God, she gives it her all. And she's an old lady. She's an old lady giving it her all. So good for her.
I like her haircut. Her haircut looks funny. Oh yeah, we forgot about the doctor character.
Oh, that's right. Also
The
evil.
weird random,
Also a terrible person.
yeah, terrible person. Very random. Doesn't really have much of like a thing going on with him, but it's funny to
Not
see him do his
really.
thing. He like shows up and he's like, uh, what he's like. I don't understand this, but there's that like part where he's like, he doesn't want her to die, right? Because he wants to continue to make money,
To
get
make
money from
money.
her. But it's
Yeah.
like, what? Like, I don't like. What do doctors only have like one? You know what I mean? It's like it doesn't make
This
any sense to
doctor,
me.
he's like
I guess he only has one patient.
he said like she makes up more than half of my income. So he's got to only have like two patients. Although it he's also
Why?
he's also blackmailing them though. So I think he's
Right,
like
that's true. There's a lot of blackmail
getting
going
paid a
on as
lot
well.
more than the other people, like
Right.
than his other clients,
He really
which
doesn't want her to die.
I mean, I guess a doctor during the 60s could easily do that. Like you could just say, if you don't pay me more money, I'll stop giving you treatment. I don't know. I guess it probably happened. It's probably a thing that happened. Maybe still happens. I don't
Mhm.
know.
I like when he's like, you can't drink any more alcohol, and she like gets really angry.
She never eats.
Her
She drinks a
reaction,
shit
yeah,
ton of
she hates
alcohol.
food. Yeah, doesn't she say like I hate food
She
or
hates
something?
food. Yeah, she says
I
I
hate
hate
food.
food.
That's such a funny line. This is just like that's why I like the writing a lot. Like when people have conversations in the movie, I don't know. I find the dialogue like really compelling. I'm just like, man, this is good. Like I like this.
There's a very specific voice in it, and it's really great. It just sounds like no other voice, and I do love the dialogue here. It's just even if it's like absurd and silly and weird, I think you can. And I think at the end of the day, this is really what the movie's about. Like, you can pretty much overlook any problem with this movie, any complaint you have of
Yeah,
this movie, because it is Andy Milligan at his core. And like, that's perfect. Like, everything just, even though like there's plenty of things that you could argue are wrong with the movie, it feels like every mistake just feels right. Like, everything just
absolutely.
works.
Yep, I totally agree. Yep, it's completely it's just it's besides like, the pornography that they have to put it into it. It is
Right.
really uninhibited, really. It quite is, just it it just really goes off. Um and that has to count for something, right? Like that really, it really does. Like, just because like Andy Milligan had a crazy life and he did so many things, and so I'm completely willing to overlook any kind of like technical stuff. Like, who cares? It's just when you're
Yeah.
watching it though, I really do find myself like quite sucked into just kind of like the way that people talk and act. Um, and I think that's what the movie's all about for sure. Andy Milligan, he puts his own like, kind of like, he'll like twist and turn the camera a lot, right? Like,
Yeah.
have you seen like that's probably like, I think he likes doing that a lot. Like when somebody's going upstairs for some reason, he'll make it like
Yeah.
turn. He puts little like kind of like touches like that to make it everything feel more crazy, I think.
Hmm. Yeah. This film just, it never stops. I mean, here there's never been a man who hates sticks more. It's almost, I think the only time this camera is ever on tripod is when we shoot that bathtub scene, which I don't even know if that's on a tripod. It might be, but otherwise it's almost
I don't know.
all handheld. It's fucking wild, man. This man, he can't put down the camera. The camera cannot be put down at any
Well,
time. We just never
they
stop
probably made it in
moving.
like a couple days as well. Probably made it in a couple days, and yeah, they just they made it really quickly, and they were just like, "Yep."
And the movie just ends too. There's no like
No,
conclusion.
I love the ending to the movie where she's thrown. The mother is thrown once again. I love the Cindy performance because, like I said, I think that at first I'm just kind of like she's acts kind of weird. I don't know, but by the time it ends, she kind of like does like I think like from the beginning she's doing this infantilizing thing, which I really
Mhm.
like, and I think it kind of shows kind of like this because of like the abuse that she suffered at a young age, probably from her mother and then probably
Yeah.
from her brother and stuff. It's kind of it's almost like she's like regressed, right, in her like mental age sort of. And so you kind of like see that on full display by the time the movie ends. And so I like kind of like how that character and that performance kind of like blooms from the beginning to the end. So that to me feels very genius. Because it was very unexpected. I wasn't expecting that.
Yeah. Yeah, it's one of those things where you go the whole movie never expecting it, but then like when it happens at the end, you're like, oh, all of these things that happened before, like they all make sense. It all like comes
Yeah.
together in this weird way, and it's very creative. It's almost like a detective story in that way, right? Because
Mhm.
all of the hints are there, and of course there's a bunch of red herrings and everything. So the ending is it's simultaneously it's inevitable, but also you don't expect it all, which is the only great way to write any sort of detective story is really how I would define this piece. And so rewatching it before we started talking on this podcast, you can kind of see all those like hints, which is really cool, right? You can see all the like the hints of like, oh, like you missed this the first time, you missed that the first time. Like there's just so
Mhm.
much thought and effort put into this, which you wouldn't think, right, for this really low budget independent film, but it's all there. It's like all behind the scenes. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's so good. I like too like the character of Mortimer too, like with like he's got like the eye patch on, and I guess he's like
I
the father
bet.
of the blonde. Yeah, I like how like when he like calls about like calling the police, right? I like too. They don't like show any police. They don't have enough money to show
No.
the fact that like they had the police come by to check out like the two dead women or whatever. They're just like, yep, I guess they're dead, and then they leave. I guess
And
like
then they just leave.
right, very low
Great police
budget, but
work.
yeah, and like he calls the police later and he's got like a smile on his face, I think. Like he seems happy. I
Yeah.
think it's because like maybe he's like I think maybe like he was maybe trying to get like the money, because there's also
Mhm.
like the two other caretakers who are like who are like in a relationship, and
Yeah.
they touch on a couple of points throughout the movie about the fact that they're trying to like, I think they're just trying to siphon money from the mom somehow.
I think
And
they're so their story is kind of cool. So what I think they're trying to do, at least from what I've gathered, is they have basically created a new will
okay, yeah,
and they've been intercepting all the mail. So they've been
you're
mailing the
right.
lawyer the new will. So they're trying to wait for her to die so they can get her money, but she just keeps living.
Right, yeah, they're
They're
like, we've
getting
been here a
pissed
year
off.
and a half, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. You're right, and then they get killed, they get poisoned with their drinks.
Yeah.
And I'm assuming like Mortimer, I'm assuming he's happy that this has happened, because I think what he's probably on the will, like
Yeah.
there's another will. That just must be what it is, right? Like he
It's
looks
gotta
really
be.
happy.
Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe yeah, it was just like he had a way too. Like he didn't want to kill any, because he didn't kill anyone, right? So he's probably in the right, and he's fine, so he's not gonna get arrested
It
for
all worked
killing
out for
someone.
Mortimer.
Yeah. Yeah, I guess, but it's not. That's not. It's nothing is said. It's just like the look on his
No.
face. But it's still pretty good. I think it's still pretty good writing to kind of like include something like in there to kind of leave you kind of thinking for a second. And yeah, it's like a movie where it doesn't have like a lot to work with, but I think like the story and the script that it has is still like really like captivating.
Mhm. Yeah.
It kind
Should
of
we
like
wrap?
pulls you. What'd you say?
Yeah, yeah.
Sorry.
No, you go. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say it kind of like I don't know, just kind of like a movie that kind of like takes you by the shirt and like shakes you around a lot.
Yeah. That's the perfect
It really
explanation.
jostles you. Yeah.
Yeah. Should we wrap it up? Give some final
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah.
All right. I'll go first this time. I feel like you've been going first a lot lately. I had no idea what this movie was or what it was going to be about. I knew nothing about Andy Milligan. I knew nothing about the movie Seeds. I went in completely blind, which for anyone who's listening to the podcast, I guess you can't go in completely blind, but I think to go in with as little information as possible with a film like this is the best way to experience it because there's really nothing quite like it. And we spent the last hour trying to talk about this film, but I don't think we can ever really do this film justice and just explain how wild and insane and just out of this world and alien almost this movie is. Like it just feels like it's a man from another planet, just someone who is trying to be human, like is pretending to be human, but doesn't understand some of the basic functions of humanity, which I think is just so interesting and wild. And as we've said, the nudity stuff, like it really doesn't add anything to the piece, but I understand like that kind of had to be part of it. Like, he was making a specific film for specific people. So I'm not really complaining here. And as I also said earlier, all of the mistakes in this film just feel right. Like everything in this film, every single second. And it is only an hour and 21 minutes long. So it's a very quick ride. It just feels right. It feels perfect. And I'd love to see a restored version of this, which Angie, you said there is a Blu-ray copy possibly of this. Maybe perhaps it's a better quality than what's on YouTube.
I don't know, maybe.
Maybe, maybe not. But if there's anyone rich out there who wants to spend some money restoring this film because I'd really like to see
I don't know,
in all its proper glory.
maybe that's about as restored as it's gonna get. I don't know. Like maybe it really does look that scratchy. I don't know.
Yeah, but you can clean it up. You can like use
I
like
guess, yeah.
the magic of I don't know. I don't know how it works, but like that's what Peter Jackson did with that World War One stuff. Like he cleaned all that stuff up. So
Yeah,
it
they gotta
can be
get
done.
Peter Jackson, yeah. Get Peter Jackson to clean it
Someone
up.
call Peter Jackson.
Yeah.
But honestly, I really love this piece. I had a great time. So solid 8 out of 10.
I'm 8 out of 10 too. I thought it was really good too. I don't know. Part of me kind of like is glad that I can't imagine it any more high fidelity than it is now. Just because it's so just like it really kind of feels like it was like thrown away and someone like took it out of the garbage can, right? Like someone like they took the film print and they threw it away, and then someone was just like,
Just
we like put
wandering
it
by.
on. Yeah, and they took it out of the garbage can, they put it on. Yeah, I like the Andy Milligan story. I think it's extremely compelling and interesting. And I think the movie is just kind of like a, a capitulation of that, right? So you kind of like get like those experiences kind of like distilled into kind of like the movie sort of, I would say. And yeah, it's just it deals with a lot of like taboo subjects, but it's still like a lot of like fun to watch. It's arguably bad, but it's really like not at all. It's
Yeah.
completely I find it to be really interesting and really I don't know, it just kind of like deals with a lot of like different like feelings as well. I think both intentional and unintentional, which I think really makes it a complicated piece. Yeah, once again, 8 out of 10, just great.
All right. Thank you all for listening. You can find everything I do at Austin Luca 12.
Yeah, I'm at Letterbox at Retro Andrew, RETR0 Andrew.
And you can find this podcast wherever you hear podcasts. You're also going to find us on Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube at Life Through Fiction or With Nothing to Say. And you can also find us on Patreon to get early access, exclusive content, and so much more at patreon.com/LTF Productions. And thank you all for listening.
Thanks again.